Okay, hello everyone. I am Dr. Tia Trevisano, naturopathic doctor and licensed acupuncturist, and the current president of the NYANP, the New York Association of Naturopathic Physicians. And I have the pleasure today of talking with Seth Hirsch from Catskills Comfrey, who I came to know through my work with the New York Association of Naturopathic Physicians. We are really grateful that he has participated in our last few annual conferences in October and has been a supporter of the NYNP and has also been collaborating with our doctors to teach us more about how he came into this work to produce this natural ointment using Comfrey and how it's been applied in his own life and with his larger audience and his clientele, and then also with naturopathic doctors. So welcome, Seth. Thank you so much for joining me. It's an absolute pleasure to speak with you as usual. So welcome.
Oh, well, thank you, Dr. Tia. Yeah, it's been a fun association. I certainly appreciate it. I've been doing this for about 5 years now, kind of self-directed, self-learning, and it's finally nice to meet a group of folks who are open actually to using these natural ingredients to help with healing and mitigation. So many times I throw it out to quote regular doctors and I get looked at with a bunch of skepticism. So using them and being appreciated for it is nice applause, and that's how I look at it.
That's great.
Uh,
Absolutely. I mean, in naturopathic medicine, we follow a certain set of principles, one of which is, to get to the root cause of imbalance, but also we think about using the least invasive modalities first. So we are highly trained in botanical herbal medicine, and we're thinking about vitamins and nutrient deficiencies, and then also, things that we do find in nature that we can use. And interestingly, of course, a lot of what is found in nature, including the plants around us, is what is being altered chemically to produce some of the more invasive and sometimes toxic medications. But to learn more about what we have available in botanical medicine and plants and fruits and foods that we have, and bringing what is on the farm and in the kitchen into medicine is, of course, a beautiful way to heal. And I think that people around the world, now that we have access to the internet and social media and all these things, are seeking this out, even if some of the more conventional, medical models are not talking about it. So tell us a little bit about how you came into this.
well, it was kind of fortuitous. My wife had done a herbology course, and almost simultaneously, she had fallen off a bike in Manhattan and hurt her pelvis. It was very painful. I think it's a smaller sprain or a little fracture, but she couldn't sleep. And we had read that comfrey might be a helpful herb, and we found a friend who had a plant. We made a poultice. And it was amazing that night, after we did the poultice, applied it to her pelvic area where it would seem to be the pain. She slept great. It was kind of surprising to say the least, but we filed that away, and she got healed eventually. Fast forward about 4 years later, I started having trigger finger symptoms, where your fingers lock up. I was self-diagnosed. I took it to the doctor. Yeah, you got trigger finger. Come back when it gets worse. And I've never been back because I went and had been looking for solutions. Literally, I was doing sea salts and things to see if I could mitigate the symptoms of locking. Thought, well, let's try the comfrey again. Made a poultice that night, and the next morning it was amazing again that I did not have any of the symptoms that normally I have when I wake up in the morning, fingers locked, crooked, etc. I was totally loose. I haven't, and I've been using it ever since with less and less, is because what I found is after you use medicinals for a while, you kind of build up a plateau in the background. And what you needed before may not be what you need, obviously, later on. So my fingers will still lock when I pull a cork out of a bottle. It seems to position it right for one of the fingers to lock. But otherwise, the trigger finger symptoms have been pretty much alleviated uh,
Wow.
because of that. So, I said to myself at the time, this is about 6 years ago now. We have the farm up here. We've been living on it more and gardening. So, well, this could be fun. There's probably a lot of people with trigger finger, and kind of embarked on that. And it's kind of been an evolving road ever since. As I learned more about the comfrey and other medicinals,
Mhm.
it's opened up new um, possibilities and for helping folks. I get a even now I get a huge array of different questions on how you can mitigate with medicinals.
Yes.
So it's been a fun road, and a very uh, one that I've appreciated and been able to kind of adhere to.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And thank you so much for sharing your personal story, because I think trigger finger is something that's, I mean, certainly it's painful. It's definitely annoying. And I'm also trained as an acupuncturist, and I know that it is something that's complicated to treat. It doesn't go away very easily. And like you mentioned, people will just say, come in when it gets worse. And what you're doing is applying one of these naturopathic principles, which is prevention. When you see something and then you're able to mitigate the symptoms right away and then use your topical ointment, you're certainly preventing it from getting any worse, and in fact helping yourself heal. And I know that for myself and many of my colleagues in naturopathic and biologic medicine, people do come into this profession because either they themselves or a family member learned through some either symptom or form of chronic illness that this approach of the natural medicinals is something that's helped them heal something that's potentially chronic and problematic over time, where some of the other methods that we have in medicine don't. So that's really a good story to hear. And people in the audience, of course, want to know more about when they're experiencing pain and discomfort and infections and things like this that can be stubborn and chronic, what they can do that's easy and right from home.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
the Comfrey's been it's been a good game. I found it to be a versatile plant. Out of the box, it's supposed to encourage cell growth. It's got this
Mhm.
allantoin, the active ingredient, which is good. It's an anti-inflammatory, helps with joint pain. Entry level. But the one that was the most interesting and the most obscure was the mucilage that Comfrey contains. And I'm not a doctor, have no training, but the mucilage, I mean, naturally, with my engineering background, I said to myself, maybe this mucilage is lubricating that skeletal substructure in the hands to loosen it up and allow it to slide around, which was apparently the principal, kind of obstruction when it
Mm.
was presenting all the time. So, it's slippery stuff. So, maybe at a micro level, that's how it works. I have no proof of
Sure.
that. But intuitively, it kind of makes sense. And I've learned to take the easy solution first and then prove that wrong and then go on to something more complicated. So
Makes sense to me. Simple is best.
yeah, for sure.
Especially, it's something I've been thinking about a lot in my practice lately, because the more complicated what seems the external world seems to be, the more we return to actually these simple principles and practices where we're using nature cure, which includes botanical medicine, herbal medicine. So that's great. And I recall, I did a lot of training in a modality called homeopathy when I was in naturopathic medical school. And symphytum, which is the Latin term for the comfrey, is one of the things you give right off the bat for a fracture. So taking it homeopathically is really helpful to heal, to speed the healing of any fractures of bone. And so the more you kind of learn about all the aspects of what the plant can do, we think of these different applications. So that was interesting to hear also the story of your wife with the pelvic injury, and how it was able to reduce the pain fairly quickly, because I've seen that using it homeopathically, that when people do fracture something, using the comfrey helps the pain heal fairly quickly. So that's great, because and we don't really want to sit around and just watch and wait when we're suffering with pain symptoms. So something else you said to me recently, which I found fascinating, and I'd like to talk to you a little bit more about, is that it takes no more time to produce something that is of high quality than it does to produce something that is poor quality. So talk to me a little bit about what goes into your product specifically, and what you think about this idea of high quality and the time involved, because I do feel like a lot of people would expect that, when you're working and producing something, from your own farm, and then you're going through the process and it is of the highest quality, that it might be very complicated and challenging to do. So that interests me.
Yeah, that goes back to an experience I had when I was first starting out. I had this idea that I was going to make this, appointment. It was going to be successful. I was going to have it in Walmart. I'd have it in CVS and everything. And eventually I secured an appointment. I was making the ointments. They were simple, as they still are. And had an appointment with CVS. Went into the meeting, and there were about 5 of these guys in suits and women in suits, dressed up, all ready to hear my story. 2 minutes into the presentation, I realized I can't deal with these people, because they're going to want me to. I've got a small farm. Everything I do has been, kind of manually oriented. I'm not really into a lot of machinery and don't want a lot of machinery. You can see that you can't tell, but I'm 75 years old. There's a limited lifespan here issue. And I said to myself, I can't do this for a big corporation. I can't pick up the phone and order a barrel of essential oils at Comfrey and have it delivered the next day. I have to grow everything. I'm not a professional farmer, but what I found was that the plants we're growing here, if you just pay attention to them and treat them right, they come out very healthy. So this, you can bulk grow stuff, or you can kind of focus on what you're doing, raise a higher quality item, make them very healthy, which is what the objective is here. And that's what I find, and that's what I give credit for, where people come back amazed that the stuff is working. I say, well, it's just healthy plants. And, I don't try to, I'll probably be the smallest person you may deal with as a company, because I have no aspirations to sell thousands of units every day. It hasn't been the goal. And so we'd rather raise to a better quality item, get it in the jar, and satisfy the people who can appreciate it and have a good time doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So, it somewhat goes back to, what I had told you was, I used to produce 22 karat gold jewelry. It takes the same amount of time to do that as it does a 14 karat gold item. Mm-hmm. So, the higher price point allows you to get a better return. And somewhat that's why I'm in this business. I'd like to, cover some expenses that old life brings in. And this has been a fun way to do it. And raising the quality, it is a bit more expensive than, a mass-produced item of essential oils that have capacities of scale to produce it cheaper. We're happy with the road we're taking. It's the road less traveled, but it's still traveled altogether.
Yes. Wonderful. Well, I know that people absolutely appreciate the dedication and also the personal touch. And when it comes to quality, you can tell and you can see, and it is part of the whole experience, and amplifies the healing effect. So talk to us a little bit more about what you have, the different, you've mentioned, we talked about Comfrey, but you're also adding some other ingredients that are good for healing as well.
Yeah, I got started. My primary care physician, who is a traditional doctor, had mentioned arnica, and that was one of the first ways. It opened my eyes up many years ago, not that many, about 5 or 6 years ago, to arnica as a possibility. And so I said, the light bulb kind of went, why am I just sticking with Comfrey? Let's add some other things, and other things that benefit. Let's not keep it just solely on Comfrey. So I started arnica. Really hard to grow to get it started, but it seems to have adapted itself. We got it in the ground, and now it's growing really well. Arnica is great for pain. We've discovered it's good anti-inflammatory, good for bruising. Mm-hmm. Another biggie that has done really well. I love calendula. Calendula has been great for what I call skin surface conditions. Um, I had an old friend who unfortunately has passed. She had breast cancer, and she raised this word with me. I had sent her after her treatment, and she said, "Boy, this ointment is very soothing." And she had put it on, and I didn't know if it was going to help her or not. But her response was, and I've heard this repeatedly, and I've discovered it myself, for itching and skin irritations. It's calendula seems to step in and fill that bill of offering a healing environment and just kind of reducing the discomfort.
Hmm.
That's been a big, nice addition. And calendula is a beautiful flower. I mean, it's just got beautiful yellows and oranges.
Sure is. Yeah.
I mean, I had a person staying here just loved to pick it and help me just because it was nice to pick. It
Hmm.
is. I mean, you go down these roads and you don't. I have poor eyesight, and I can. It's easy to focus, if that's the right word, on just the larger petals of orange and yellow and pick those, and that's all you kind of need to be aware of. Just pick the best ones, the best color. Um, we're growing St. John's wort now. Got
Oh,
a beautiful 100-foot row of St. John's wort coming up in the spring. St. John's wort's been a real, if it's the right word, shouldn't say killer, but really stops cold sores and fever blisters like
yes.
before they ever erupt. And I was so surprised with this. I have one that breaks out of my mouth every time I get stressed. Um, and the Ukrainian thing got me stressed out, and I could feel it coming. I put the St. John's wort on, and it disappeared before it ever erupted, which is typically I let it erupt and get a hole in my mouth, on my lip, and treat it with the Comfrey.
Hmm.
Um, but this time it just went away. So that's been quite encouraging. Burdock root, we don't grow the burdock root. I have a supplier who gives me burdock root or provides it. Been really pleased with that. Burdock we found is good for yeast infections, external yeast infections apparently, acne. So all of these uh, herbs. Cleavers grows on our property in abundance. Cleavers is good for lymphatic drainage.
Hmm.
I didn't know what it was until my wife pointed it out and said, "Why are you so irritated with that? It's cleavers." And I could rename our farm Cleavers Farm. We have so much of it out in the field. Um, that's been the yarrow. Yarrow is another one that goes way, way back in history books for usage for healing wounds. Who was it that Achilles
Hmm.
uh, back in the early days apparently referenced yarrow
Yep.
for his soldiers. Um,
Yes.
we're blessed with a lot of yarrow that grows naturally, and it's nice to walk the fields and come up with these things that just grow there. They're put out there to. I don't have to put much effort, and they really grow well. So that's a small sampling of the ones we focus on. There's hundreds more out there. I mean, you can
Mm.
go to Amazon and look, and there's just a wealth of different things that are available. And there's only so much that I can do. So I'm kind of settling in on the ones we focus on:
Hmm.
skin surface conditions, your eczema, your psoriasis issues, your rash, sunburn issues, and then we do joint pain. So the stable of uh, medicinals we use now seem to cover those well. If you come up with too many choices, people get confused,
Hmm.
and tend to settle on small group that work really well. And that's what we're
Hmm.
trying to do now. Where we've settled, we've got about 8 different ointments that focus on, again, on the joint pain, arthritic issues, and
Hmm.
or skin surface
Hmm.
issues.
Well, pain is a very powerful motivator for patients to get to know some of these things that are available. I often think about creating, my natural first aid kit. And especially if you're traveling or even just to have at home, have in the car, some of these things we can apply, for any kind of acute sprain. You said skin surface issues, absolutely, that can be really uncomfortable. And I would say you mentioned some of really the most prominent and important herbs that we do utilize in daily practice in naturopathic medicine. Arnica, for sure, is something that I always have in my medicine medicine cabinet and that I take with me if I'm traveling and something may happen, you never know. And the calendula we used to utilize when I was in my naturopathic training as part of our minor surgery tincture, because it does heal the surface of the skin so quickly and has properties that can also keep things from getting infected. So that's wonderful. And I'll just share a personal story that I am a surfer, and I occasionally have some little things happen when I'm in the ocean. And over the summertime, one of those incidents was that I got knocked with the fin from the backside of my surfboard. And what did help me the most in terms of healing what was kind of a stubborn scar was the Catskills Comfrey with calendula. So I was grateful. I put on my arnica, and then I went back to my medicine cabinet and I got that one out, and so that helps the scar the most. And you also mentioned St. John's wort, which is such a wonderful herb. Again, homeopathically, it's actually a really powerful supportive herb and as a botanical tincture for depression. But topically, not just with the antiviral properties, with the fever blisters and things like that, also for any kind of nerve pain, tailbone pain. So that's another area where, if you knock your tailbone and there's some kind of fracture or issue there, all you really can do is sit on one of these pillows and wait for it to heal. So that's another nice thing to have right on hand, because I think oftentimes, when we get hurt, if we have injuries, things going on in the skin, we may be going to visit our specialists to take a look, take an x-ray, or the dermatologist to see what's going on. But then after that, we may not have access to something that can really speed the healing without any suppressive side effects. So all the herbs that you mentioned are really powerful healers to keep in the medicine cabinet and to have with you. And I would say some of your ointments are available in nice little travel sizes, which is great too.
Yeah, you mentioned the scarring thing. Here's my own little story about the scarring. And it's apparently the same ointment. It's the arnica and the calendula blend. I had a triple bypass, and there were 2 cuts on my body for surgery. Of course, the sternum cut, and I had the vein was taken for the heart repair from my forearm. So I treated those 2 scars after surgery almost immediately, surrounding the cuts. And then about 2 weeks later, I started applying directly the arnica and the calendula. And without exception, virtually any professional who's seen the repairs has commented how well that scarring has been completely reduced. I mean, it's probably like 96% gone. You really have to look to see it on my forearm for a scar.
Great.
So yeah, the arnica, the calendula, and the comfrey really step in those cases to do a good job.
Yeah, it's very fascinating. I have been training in a few different types of modalities over the years, and specifically with acupuncture and a few other things. We don't talk very much about how scarring can actually negatively affect us in a lot of different ways. Now, of course, when the body experiences a trauma, there's a cut for either a surgical reason or because we have an accident, an injury, the scar tissue needs to form in order for the skin to heal. But when it does so, it can create adhesions. It's also a place where sometimes, if we think about in Chinese medicine, we think a lot about the body as a landscape, as rivers that are sort of flowing with the fluids moving up and down from head to toe, and everything is connected. We have these channels that is kind of like an electromagnetic energy grid that when a scar forms, it really can create an obstruction in the circulatory flow of both blood and lymphatic and energy. And that can create some problems down the line, and interestingly could be connected to anything in the body, from some of your organs experiencing issues to headaches, to all kinds of physical and also even sometimes mental emotional symptoms. So taking a look at scar tissue issue, and actually treating it is an important way to help your body heal holistically. So there's a lot of different disciplines that focus on that a little bit, but it's not something that's commonly talked about. And I've noticed over the years, from some of the wounds, the scars can get itchy. I mean, they really do start to talk to you. So having something to treat them topically that doesn't require, needles and things like this is really wonderful. And that calendula works great. And arnica, wonderful too, of course, for the blood. You mentioned the veins. So I think of arnica really to treat also the blood.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, the arnica has been a strange one. We had, and I'm curious this spring to see if how it all responds. This last spring, we had a cold snap after the spring started. And we got a big freeze here. And it seems to have affected the comfrey and arnica are both heavily root influenced. I like kind of say they depend on their roots a lot. The arnica spreads by roots. You can move the roots around and it'll start growing again. Comfrey the same way, and the cold seemed to adversely affected the growth last year. The yield on arnica was way down last year because of that. So I'm kind of curious to see what's going to happen this year as it comes back, to see if it pops up as hopefully as it has done in prior years last year. So yeah, we like arnica. People recognize arnica as one of the big ones when I do events, public events. I get people nod their head and understand arnica. They've used it, and it's a known variable to them that they can relate to.
Mm-hmm. So we talked about some of the conditions. So certainly the St. John's wort's going to help with nerve pain and fever blisters, the arnica for bruising, calendula. What conditions have you gotten some positive feedback aside from just, healing the skin surface and specifically bruising? Anything else come to mind that was just a really impressive report in terms of a type of condition or illness that you've seen with the different ointments?
Well, I get a lot of them. We've seen. Seems like when there's foot issues, because I found that using topical ointments where there's a lot of body mass, like if people complain about hip pain, I know that it's not going to be immediate. Whereas if you have trigger finger symptoms or foot sometimes because there's not a lot of body mass, when you put the ointment on, it goes right to the area and you don't have a lot of diffusion to surrounding areas that don't really cover the area. So was it plantar fasciitis seems to respond well to comfrey in the pain ointments. I've had devil's claw has been a real big help, devil's claw root for joint pain. That's been one of the upcoming stars, it seems, of medicinals that I found extremely helpful. I tried to grow some this last year, and that was totally unsuccessful. It's the root that I get does come from Africa, and when you use it in an ointment, I've got to combine with one with CBD. CBD is good for joint pain, and combined with devil's claw, it's really been a big help for people with serious joint pain, osteoarthritis, issues like that. We've had, the sunburn is always good. Calendula is good for sunburn. Comfrey, I always think that eczema and psoriasis, I get a lot of queries about. And again, that's where it seems that comfrey seems to respond to that demand by the body for new skin cells. Atopic dermatitis seems to generate a big demand for new cells, and comfrey combined with calendula seem to respond to that. I can't prove it again. I think that the ability of comfrey to produce new skin cells, encourage cell growth, helps in a lot of these cases. It's kind of been in the past an unappreciated worker in these cases. Calendula gets a lot of the credit.
Yeah.
But working together, that's why I'm curious about this. We talked about a bit about this calendula plus for radiation dermatitis. This came up a few months ago when it was, I was reading about breast cancer and the huge number among women who what is it,
Yeah,
like 1 in 8 women we're going to have breast cancer experience, and that's a huge number.
it is.
Uh, um, and so one of the aspects of what is it, radiation dermatitis is radiation burn.
Hmm.
Again, calendula, there are products already out there. I haven't invented anything new, but the fact that we combined it with the Comfrey, which creates new skin cells, helps create it in a heavy, heavy dose of calendula, I think is going to be a real simple approach to dealing with a difficult problem. A problem that can't.
Absolutely. And you mentioned the stuff is slippery, right? So it's soothing, which is the most important piece. It's so soothing to the skin and can help when, I mean, you're dealing with such a difficult process. It's there. You mentioned a lot of conditions where I think that the typical response, if you go into a doctor's office, would be that there's not much to do. For a lot of the skin conditions, you're looking at something steroidal or it comes and goes, leave it alone kind of response. So it's great to hear your results when you've been working with folks when looking at eczema, psoriasis, any kind of dermatitis, the wound healing. You mentioned joint pain. I do a lot of work with patients with Lyme disease, which is, of course, somewhere where people do suffer quite a lot. And it's a multi-systems illness, as many of the illnesses are these days when we're looking into autoimmune and chronic degenerative, neurological, things that begin in the guts that are inflammatory. We see things popping up on the skin. And, to first of all, of course, treat the skin to reduce the issues that are going on there. The skin is one of our largest detoxification organs. So if we are having problems internally, the body really may push and express some of the issues through the skin. So I always think when I'm working with patients of treating things, from the outside in and the inside out, we want to get to the root cause in naturopathic medicine of anything that's going on causing the illness. But it's also really important to be providing this, not just symptom relief, because treating the skin, of course, will be symptom relief, but also healing, because you're talking about the turnover, creating new skin cells. When
Mm.
we're all I would say in modern medicine, modern society, we are too focused underneath a paradigm of kind of fear, and it's automatic that things are going to get worse as we age, and that chronic illness is kind of inevitable, and that we're going to have creaks and aches and pains, and we kind of just have to deal with it. I always like to actually think about the idea that every night when we go to bed, our body is building new cells. And so the more we encourage this production of, new cells, and we actually keep up with regenerating as we degenerate. So this is what these herbs we've been talking about today do on the surface of the skin, that this process of moving forward in time and space in life does not have to be so painful. And it's just not what we talk about. You mentioned osteoporosis, that's one of these classic illnesses where we just think about, well, things are going to break down, and they do break down, but they also rebuild, just like as in farming, you're seeing in the seasons, the plants are growing and then they're breaking down, and then we're getting new ones, the next season. So I love that aspect of naturopathic medicine when we think about the body's innate capacity to heal itself, when you just facilitate the process. And you can certainly see that with topical ointments and poultices, you mentioned, which is really just a topical application of the herb to help things heal. You see that process occurring more rapidly, and with the symptoms being reduced. So it's interesting to take that approach. How do we heal? How does nature help us heal?
Right.
And the fact that it doesn't have to be so painful.
One of the things about Comfrey, you'll see this when the FDA guidelines, they'll say, don't ingest.
Hmm.
That's been a cautionary note. And I can't say that it's a PA. I don't know how to say the condition, perolizidine
Right.
alkaloids.
Yes.
They're associated with Comfrey. Now, that comes back from a test from many, many years ago. And I'm not going to comment on the test, other than I think they had rats eat about 100 times their weight a day and they got sick. Of course, they got sick. But
Yes.
so anyway, there's a process in the herbal community to do infusions. You may be familiar with infusions.
Mhm.
Comfrey is one of the 5 that they often suggest. And now, con, and again, FDA says don't drink it. Well, I mentioned I'm immersive. I use Comfrey a lot. I've been putting it on my body. And so about a year ago, I decided to start doing these infusions. Now, infusion is a concentrated tea. It's a cup of dried comfrey infused overnight, 24 hours, boiling water, and about 4 cups of water. Comes out in the morning and you drink it the next day. So you're getting a heavy dose internally of comfrey. And I was taking it because my left knee had gotten really bad with stabs of pain. I was treating it with ointments, but it would just seem to be I was putting more and more ointments on more frequently, and it wasn't uh, things weren't quite going right.
Mm-hmm.
Started the infusion twice a week, heavy dose, and after about 6 months, after about 3 months, I noticed I was putting on less ointments every day. The pain was being all to the good. About 6 months after that, of doing this twice a week, I had my annual physical. And so my doctor agreed to run. I told him what the issue was. He's aware that I do a lot of comfrey. I said, I'd like to have blood test work done on to check the liver. That's where the alkaloids
Yes.
tend to accumulate. Let's do a check. And he said, okay. So he ran a full metabolic panel on the blood, 2 of which apparently focus on the liver. It was totally negative. There was nothing there. So that was, of course, encouraging.
Yes.
And here I've had the benefit of now, and I'm still doing, I don't do it twice a week. I do it about once a week now, these infusions. And I feel like not only has the pain been reduced in my left knee, I still put on ointments, not as frequently, but I feel like the knee grew some material. Like
Mm-hmm.
internally, the comfrey that was coursing through my body grew some new stuff. I mean, again, comfrey encourages cell growth. So perhaps it came in and helped the knee repair itself.
Mm-hmm.
Um, again, I can't prove it. There's no documentation for that. It's just a lot of this is subjective.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm totally convinced that Comfrey's helping me.
Well,
Uh,
the subjective is really important. I do think that people benefit from hearing personal stories. It's really important. And you do bring up an important point, which is also a caution, which is where I think naturopathic medicine can step in really well, which is there is a lot of information out there in the world right now. And there's information about botanical medicine. There are things that have been published that is the result of a study, and it's happened with many different herbs. The dose does matter, and any underlying conditions does matter. So sometimes we'll hear information about a certain herb and it's gotten a bad rap, but that's primarily coming from, we kind of took the ball and then ran with it from one study in which it was used in a dose that it would not actually be utilized for the human population when you're taking it correctly, the way it's intended to be used as an herbal botanical medicine. So you mentioned, taking the tea, and you're talking about monitoring liver enzymes. So naturopathic doctors are trained as drug herb nutrient experts, and also people who would understand the proper way to use herbal medicine, and to be aware that if you're taking something internally, that it is important to be mindful of if there are any side effects, but also to recognize that a lot of the information that's out there when it comes to botanical medicine, unfortunately, some of these things have been a little bit more fear-based. But if we read all the details of the study and we get to the bottom of it, we can kind of understand why, that the dose and the manner in which we are taking these remedies is important. So, of course, as we're having a conversation here, none of this is meant to be medical advice, but certainly talking with your practitioner is always really important. And I love the idea of education in medicine as empowerment for people. So thinking about how to become an educated consumer of medicine is really one of my kind of missions that I do with patients, to think about. There's so much out there, and a lot of it is very appealing to us because it sounds great, or someone someone is sharing a story through social media. And so it can become a little overwhelming to try to understand what's going to be the best product, what's the best choice. And so it's wonderful to hear your personal story about that, and the fact that you were working with a doctor and you were able to really kind of test the outcome of what you had been doing from a safety and efficacy standpoint. And I just want to encourage everybody in the audience, as they get to know more about natural medicine, that ask your expert, ask your local expert what's best for you to do and take, and when what's safe and what's a good choice for you.
Yeah, it's yeah, it's been a fun. I get a lot of feedback from folks, and the fact that I keep getting these enthusiastic responses, of course, is very encouraging. But it's also telling me that, hey, the stuff works. I'm always
Yeah.
amazed that these plants. I mean, they're supposed to. I mean, they've got the ingredients, but it is always very nice and satisfying
Mhm.
to know that they do offer benefit, and they don't have the side effects. I mean, you hear these drugs on television, they spend half the time on the ad telling you what they could possibly affect
Yeah.
to your disbenefit, whereas the natural ones are kind of in tune with what we're
Right.
doing.
And
Uh,
this is why we're exactly here, having this conversation to spread awareness, because I have a hard time even getting through one of those ads without turning off the television or the radio, because we're living in challenging times. I mean, I was fairly a young person, and it was prior to my journey with natural medicine, but I do recall sort of a pit in my stomach the first time I heard pharmaceuticals being advertised on television, because of what I felt was going to be a really negative ramification, that, this is maybe not the best place to be talking about a person's health from that marketing standpoint, in terms of, and especially when you're talking about all these negative effects. So I think it's a wonderful thing to have these conversations where we can spread awareness about the things that do not have this laundry list of toxic side effects and can cause such potential harm, so that maybe we have in the future more people asking about what are the benefits of food, what are the benefits of plants, maybe I'm deficient in this, maybe I need this, before just going into an office and asking for a drug. And pain is really one of the most important places. We do have really epidemic crisis in pain medications, so being able to offer something that can actually help people reduce the symptoms associated with chronic joint pain or pain anywhere else in the body is so important.
yeah, it's the times that I've seen people respond. The CBD seems to be the one of the go-to. Chili pepper was the one that I
Mhm.
found. We hadn't mentioned that. Um, is a great source of. I didn't know this. I mean, I was doing some research and found that chili pepper is kind of like the go-to, one of the most heavily researched pain relief mechanisms. Um, and to think that you can put the hot stuff on your joints and it seems to alleviate and offer relief pretty quickly is was a surprising finding when I discovered, and I got all enthused about chili pepper. But um, yeah, that's another one of those that offers nice benefit for a real common item.
Mhm.
Uh,
Yeah, and you said heavily researched, and I think that is important. There is a lot of research that has been done into the, really all of these different herbal medicinals. And so if it's not the first thing that we find is the positive research, it's just important, I think, for folks in the audience to know that it really has been researched, and there is good research out there, if that's something that's important to you to know about, not just how far it dates back to so many ancient cultures and civilizations. You mentioned Achilles, that story. I mean, it's really fascinating to dig into the history and know where all of these things things come from in ancient cultures, there's also been a lot of scientific studies that have been done that we can find to talk about the applications of different herbs, both topically and taking them internally. So it is also highly scientific. And then I think what helps people the most, though, truthfully, is hearing the personal stories. This is what I was dealing with. This was what I was suffering from, and this is what helped me heal. So you're right about that, the chili pepper, which actually brings me to a question for those of us in the audience that might be curious. Are you using any of this topically on the face? Of course, chili pepper, you have to be so careful not to get
Mm.
near the mucous membranes. So if someone is suffering from rosacea or acne on the face region, do you have any favorites, and is it safe to put it there?
Well, yeah, I've got a few people who, now we've got a waxless version. It's easier to spread versus a little bit of wax we do add for consistency. But I've had folks who regularly treat their, as a face treatment, with the original. And
Okay.
the idea being that you rub it on or you apply it regularly, and it builds up this kind of lurking background, I say noise, but it's a benefit. It sits in your skin, and again, this is my engineering side speaking. I'm thinking that, yeah, you build up this good benefit underneath the skin that's sitting there, and it will maybe ward off the bad conditions that can arise before they get serious.
Mm-hmm.
Comfrey's a great uh, anti-infection kind of thingy. Um, I sometimes will get in my eyes these little infections around the corners of my eyes, and
Mm-hmm.
it's uncomfortable. I can do a comfrey wash, a little light tea, and put a soak on my eyes, and it will clear it out within a day.
Mm-hmm.
I get these, another use of the comfrey um, is I have macular degeneration and get these injections every couple months. And the doctor's great. But I told her that occasionally the needle that goes in your eyeball causes bruising. I call
Yeah.
it bruising. Your eyes get sore, and eventually it'll go away. It takes 3 or 4 days, but it's pretty discomforting. And it's your eyes, so it's right in front of you all the time, literally.
Mm-hmm.
I found this comfrey washes will knock it out overnight. Will reduce the bruising to nowheresville the next day. And I've now got my ophthalmologist. She's become a convert, and she uses them as a rinse just to rest her eyes.
That's
Uh,
great.
that. So I mean, that's one aspect of putting it. It's kind of an extreme one, but on the skin for sure. There's again, just get it to distribute it in the areas of concern. I was going to say, if you knew you were going to have surgery and you knew where the cuts were going to be,
Mm-hmm.
treat those areas like a couple weeks before. Start applying the
Yeah.
arnica and the calendula, for example. So when the cut does come in, you've already got a ready reservoir,
Yeah.
good stuff working there in the skin to help you start healing immediately.
Yes.
The surgeons don't like you to put. I can agree with them. They put that liquid skin on you or something, and they don't
Mm-hmm.
want anything else on that. But that disappears in a couple weeks, and after that, it's applying it there. Again, you've got that reservoir buildup. And it simply helps, and that's
Yes.
the same for the skin. The rosacea,
Mm-hmm.
uh, either the wax free. Dr. Carl gave me one of the great suggestions for the waxless. She said, "What about scalp psoriasis?"
Mm-hmm.
No, and you don't want to put a waxy, even though I don't put much wax in the ointments, you don't necessarily want to put it in your hair.
Right.
You know?
Sure.
And so I came up with, and now virtually the entire line of that I offer is available as wax free
Mm-hmm.
for those situations who people are either wax averse or wax allergic, or have situations where they just want the wax free to apply to their face, to their hair, scalp. It's a better delivery system.
Mm-hmm. That's great.
Uh,
That's great.
uh, so it's all a case of learning and getting feedback from folks, and
Sure.
sometimes the best suggestions are often the most obvious, but you never think about them until someone else points them out.
I know.
And in my case, I'm not a medical professional, so they're not going to come across my desk
Yeah,
unless I've got my knee pain, I've got my fever
sure.
blisters,
Yeah.
and that's the realm of that I deal with in terms of my own lab.
Hmm.
So there's
Well, but
certainly
and you also highlighted yet again one of my favorite principles in naturopathic medicine, which is prevention. We're trained to kind of only take care of things after they happen. But if you do need to go into surgery for whatever reason, prepping the skin is an excellent idea because it's going to speed the healing, which will ultimately reduce pain. So it's a great idea to think about how to prevent things from worsening. And I do often think about in naturopathic medicine, very specifically, education from the standpoint of empowerment, because the more we learn about what we can do for the self-care and self-healing aspect, the better we feel ultimately, but also it can prevent a lot of more serious issues down the line, which are costly both in terms of dollars, but also the emotions and the physical stuff that we need to deal with as well. So it's great to think about, not just addressing things after they happen, but also how to prevent them from happening at all or from getting worse. So it's really wonderful to talk with you as always, Seth. So tell everybody how they can find you. We see in the background your Catskills Comfrey label, but if people in our audience are interested in purchasing any of these things or knowing more, how do they find you?
Well, they can find me on the website at catskillscomfrey.com. I mean, that's the
Great.
easy way. Amazon seems to be a nice outlet for me. You can find our products, not all of them. Uh, Amazon is not cooperative with CBD-based products.
Gotcha.
Um, We've got some local in the Kingston area. There's Mother Earth,
Hmm.
has been very helpful. And out in Great Barrington, there's is it the Berkeley, not the Berkshire
Ah,
Co-op.
great.
They're nice. They've been very cooperative over the years, have good ideas. So yeah, those are the main ones.
Excellent.
So we're available. We're out there, and we always like to hear from folks and hear the complaints. So maybe we can turn those into some positive responses.
And plenty of positive feedback. I know my patients have really benefited from connecting with you, and I was pleased to see your products in one of my local stores very recently. I didn't even know it was there, and I was happy. I was just doing some Christmas shopping, and I saw it there, and I just very grateful again. This is naturopathic medicine, and natural medicine in action is really utilizing what is least invasive and growing from the ground, available on the farm, either herbally to be using as tinctures or ointments, or also, of course, in food, vitamins, minerals. This is something that we can continue to educate people more and more about what's available, what's a minimally or not at all invasive approach to treating what we've talked about today, some incredibly known to be stubborn, difficult things to treat. So we covered a lot of different topics. So I just want to say, on behalf of the NYANP, for those of you in the audience who don't know who we are, the New York Association of Naturopathic Physicians, we are so grateful to be collaborating with you and continuing these discussions about how plant medicine can work to heal everything from pain to dermatitis to fever blisters to scalp psoriasis and beyond. So thank you so much for joining me today. And I really appreciate your work, your enthusiasm, your support of the NYNP, and looking forward to continuing the discussion with you.
Well, thank you, Dr. T. It's been fun. I appreciate the support.
Great. Wonderful.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you so much.